Jenny. I'm sure I've met most of you, and we actually got to meet in person. We're going to make Pong today. It's a 2D game. Hopefully you all have your Unity open to the end of where the steps were that were on the thing that was listed on Meetup. If not, open it up and start a new 2D scene and name it something. Let me know at any point if I'm going too fast or if I need to slow down, or if you're lost, and me and Vast will help you figure out where things got behind. So first we're going to start off by making two folders over here in our assets window, just to kind of help keep things organized. So if you right click, you can go to create and folder, and we're going to name one of our folders scripts, and that's going to keep all the scripts that we make today organized. And we're also going to make one to keep some materials, well, a material organized. So we'll name that materials. And then we're also going to check and make sure that we do have our game in 2D, and that down here at our game window, we have it set to 16 by 9. So that way it'll always be the same size consistently. All right, now we're going to start off by making our ball. So to make our ball, we're going to go up here to the hierarchy, and we're going to right click, and we're going to create a 2D object, and it's going to be a sprite. And once we have that made, we're going to go over here and we're going to pick the shape of our sprite, and that's going to be right here, the circle one, knob. So once we have that done, we're going to change the draw mode and set that to sliced. And then we're also going to resize it because we can see our ball here on our game window, and it's really tiny. We don't want it that small. So we're going to set it to 0.5 and 0.5. So it's a pretty good size. I mean, if you want it bigger, you can make it to whatever number you want. And then we're also going to come up here to the transform, and we're going to reset it so it's in the middle of our game. Everybody pretty much caught up? Then we're going to go ahead and also name this ball so we know what it is. All right, now we're going to go on to make our paddles. We're going to go ahead and make one paddle first, and then we'll talk about different ways we can make our second paddle. So making the paddle is about the same way as making the ball. We're going to make a 2D object and make another sprite. And then when we pick our sprite, we're going to use this one that says UI sprite. It's kind of a square shape. And then we're going to change the draw mode to tiled this time. And then we're also going to change the size. Are going to set this one, since it's going to be a rectangle, to 0.5 for its width, and then 1.5 for its height. Makes a nice sized rectangle.
Just real quick.
I know I'm missing something too.
The only reason that she's using these sprites is because they're the ones that are built in with Unity. You absolutely could use any sprite that you wanted to download or create.
Yep. And there's some pretty cool ones out there too. And then let's rename this paddle so we know what it is. And then our ball and our paddle both need two things to work. They need colliders. So we're going to click on your ball and then go to add component. And then, at least on mine, I've typed up here in the search CO so that all my options, because I'm looking for a collider. And down here we have a circle collider, and it's in 2D. We want to make sure we don't pick a 3D one. And when we click on that, it's going to give us the collider box for our circle. To make sure the collider box actually fits our circle, we can click here on this one that's Edit Collider and make sure that this little box, or this little circle, is actually around our circle. We want to make sure it's not too small or not too big, because that'll make our ball not work correctly. And then we also have to go down to the paddle and add a component. Again, if you need to type in CO for collider, and we're going to put a 2D box collider on that one. And then just the same like the other one, we're going to have to adjust our collider to make sure, because see right here when I added it, this little square here is the collider, and that doesn't line up at all with our paddle. So if I click on edit the collider, I can adjust it. Oh, wait, there we go. These little boxes and make them the right size. All right, so now we got our ball and one paddle. Not bad. Everybody good so far?
See.
Cool, I'm just gonna keep on going. Be sure you save your game if you haven't. Before we move on, just Control S. All right, so now we have our one paddle and we need to make one more paddle. There's a couple ways we can do this. We can go through all those steps again and make another paddle. We can make our paddle what's called a prefab, which means we'd be able to use it over and over. Or the easiest way is to duplicate it, since we really only need one more. To duplicate it, you can either right click and click duplicate, or you can also hit Control D and it makes another paddle. So since we now have two paddles, to keep them straight, we're gonna have player 1 and player 2. So I'm gonna rename my first paddle to player 1, and I'm gonna rename my second paddle to player 2. Now we're gonna move on to making some walls. Before we start adjusting where our paddles are gonna be, we wanna know kind of where the edge of our bumpers for the screen are gonna be, so we can make sure everything's pretty even. So in order to make the walls, we're actually going to duplicate one of our paddles and just use that again. Since it makes it pretty easy, it's already a rectangle. So let's duplicate it one more time. And we're just going to rename this right now to wall so we know what it is. And now we're gonna go ahead and resize this and put it in the correct position. So our position is going to be, we can go over here to the transform, and it's going to be -9, which puts it way over to the left. And then we want it at 1. Oh no, we don't want it. At 0 and 0 for those. And then we're going to change the scale of this so that it's bigger. We want it to be 7. So position X will be -9, Y will be 0, and Z will be 0. And then the position should be 0, 0, 0, or rotation should be 0, 0, 0. And your scale will be X is 1, Y is 7, and Z is 1. So that puts it nice and lined up on our left-hand side. And we can also see in our game window that we have the edge of it just lined up on the edge of the screen. And now to make it really easy, we're just going to duplicate this. And we're just going to do the opposite by changing our position from -9 to 9. And now we've got 2 walls. And then we can rename these to, we're gonna call player 1 will be on our left, player 1 wall. And then we will add the other wall will be player 2 wall. Because these 2 side walls are also gonna count as our score walls. So when the ball hits the score wall, it'll add to the player's score. So if we keep them named that way, we'll know where they are. All right, now we're gonna make the top and the bottom walls by pretty much doing the same thing by duplicating the wall. So we'll make another one. We can go ahead and rename it and call it wall top, because we'll make it our top wall. And then we're going to adjust our position by making it up at the top of the screen. Mine's way off. And then we're gonna rotate it 90 degrees on the Z. Make sure our position 0, 5, 0, and then we're going to change our scale is going to be 13 on the Y. So for the top, you'll have your position at X is 0, Y is 5, and Z is 0. Your rotation on the X and the Y are 0, and on Z, it's 90. And then your scale for X will be 1, for Y will be 13, and Z will be 1. And then we'll do the same thing with this one that we did with the other. We're going to duplicate it and make the bottom wall. So we can duplicate it, rename it to wall bottom. And then we're going to change its position from being at x of 0, y 5, it'll be y negative 5. So things are starting to look kind of good. We have 4 walls and 2 paddles, even though they're on top of each other. To kind of organize things a little bit, because I mean, our hierarchy is kind of getting big and there's a lot of stuff in it. We're going to go and right click and create an empty game object. And then we want to go up to these little right circles on the transform and make sure we reset it to 0. And we're going to name this walls. And we're going to drag all of our walls into this game object. It just holds it, keeps it a little more organized. I mean, if you're not working on the walls and you don't want to look at them, you can close it up so they're just not all in the way. Everybody pretty much caught up? Any questions?
Yeah, but just real quick, just to point out, notice that she did that reset on the empty game object of walls first. That's very important that you do, because otherwise all of those walls that she drug into the walls game object for the hierarchy would have offset their position and offset their transform, so position, rotation, everything, by whatever the walls one was. So it's important to have that at 0 so that your new positions aren't offset by whatever it was. Cool.
Which I think we had problems with when I was making this.
Doing good.
Yeah. All right, so now we're going to move our paddles so they're not all bunched up in the middle on top of each other. So let's click on player 1 and we're going to change its position so that x is -8 and y is 0. So it's all nice and lined up with the middle of our game. And then we're going to do the same thing with player 2. We'll make x be 8 and y is 0 and z should be 0. So there we go. We have that all lined up.
Oh,
all right.
Just a real quick point, especially for Felipe, since he was asking about the differences in 2Ds. Notice that she's changing stuff on the Z as well to like 0. In 2D, that doesn't matter except for ordering. So, you know, there is no forward and back in 2D, right? It's only X and Y. But if you had 2 things that were on top of each other, the Z would move it, would change the layering order so that the camera might see the one that you wanted and the other one might go behind it. So just a tidbit there.
It can really mess things up if you set your camera to the wrong Z. All right, so let's make sure we save our game, and just out of curiosity, we're gonna hit play and see what it does. And it does nothing, as it should. All right, so now we're gonna move on to making everything move. So we're going to give the ball some physics. Unity has a built-in physics engine that works automatically. It's kind of easy to use, I think. We're going to use this by clicking on our ball, and we're going to add a component, and we're going to add a rigid body. And we want to add a rigid body 2D, not a 3D one. All right, so just from that change, if we save our game and we click play, the ball should fall, because now the ball has gravity.
Hey, Jenny,
yes.
Just real quick, you've got a question from Catherine.
Oh.
Catherine, to answer your question, if you highlighted all 4 of the walls, or if you highlight any number of objects, what Unity will do is it will look through all of those objects and it will see if all of the things that are the same. So if you highlighted 4 things and changed the position to 5, all of those things have the same property of position. So it would change all of those to 5. Same thing with the when you're adding or removing components. So if she highlighted all those walls and then she added a component of rigid body, it would add it to all 4 because all 4 of those could accept the rigid body. That's a good question, by the way.
This is a good question. All right, so now that we have our rigid body on our ball, and our ball falls, we don't really want our ball to fall, we kind of want it to bounce. So we're going to make a material that's bouncy so we can make our ball bounce. So we're gonna go to the assets and our materials folder, and we can go ahead and create a new physics material 2D. And we are going to name this bouncy material. And then it gives us two options. We can change the friction and the bounciness. We're going to change our friction to 0 and our bounciness to 1. And then we're going to take our bouncy material, or click on our ball, and then we'll go down here to our rigid body 2D, and where it says material none, we're going to drag our bouncy material right into that spot. So it now has bouncy material. And now we can play our game and see what happens to the ball. Our ball bounces now.
Just real quick, I just want to make the distinction, since a lot of you were in the talk with me, that and we put material on things. The physics material is a completely different thing than the material that you put on for texture rendering. I just want to put that out, because myself included, whenever I first started in game dev, I was like, what do you mean? This says material. This is not the same thing. It isn't. A physics material specifically deals with physics, and a material is just for texturing. So I just wanted to make that distinction so that nobody got confused.
All right, now let's put our bouncy material on some other things. We can make our walls bouncy. I put it on the top and the bottom. We don't really, I mean, you could put it on the player 1 wall and player 2 wall, but we're not going to be bouncing the ball off of those. I put it in my box collider in the physics material. I put bouncy material for my wall top and for my wall bottom. You can't go wrong with more bouncy things. All right, so now we know if we play our game, our ball bounces, but this is Pong and we don't really want our ball dropping and bouncing. So we're gonna go ahead and turn off gravity. So we're gonna go up here to edit and go to our project settings. And then here where it says physics 2D, right at the top, it has gravity. And then we have an X and then Y has a value. We're gonna get rid of that and just make it 0. So there is no gravity. If you played a game where people were jumping off of things, you wouldn't want to mess with that. But for Pong, we don't want that. So let's go ahead and press play again, and our ball should just stay in one spot. Yep, my ball doesn't go anywhere. All right, everybody good up to that point? All right, now we're going to write some C#. So let's go to our scripts folder, and we're going to create a new script. So we'll right click, create a C# script. And we are going to call this ball script. This is going to handle some of the things that we need our ball to do. So now let's open that up. And we have our Visual Studio. And we are going to start off by declaring some variables. So the first one we're going to make, we're going to do serialized field. And that'll be a private float called force value. And we're going to set it to 4.5. This is going to help us when our ball starts and when our game starts. We want our ball to have kind of like a push so it could get started. And then making it a serialized field and private. So serialized field will make sure we can see it in Unity and we can adjust it. And then the private keeps it from other people being able to adjust it if they were doing something else in the game. And then we also need to refer to the ball's rigid body 2D so we could do things with that. And we're gonna call it my body. Then to initialize our body, we're gonna put in start. We're gonna assign it. So my body get component, and the component we are going to get is our rigid body 2D. not that. All right, so this will create a variable my body, and then it'll assign a reference to the ball's rigid body using this variable. So after start is called, we'll be able to refer to the ball's rigid body as my body. Makes it easier. And then to get our ball started at the start of the game, we are going to use my body, and we're going to add force. And then we have to say where we're adding force, which is a new vector2. And then we're going to use our variable force value that we made, and we're going to multiply it by 50. But of course, we don't want to leave that 50 in there, so we're going to assign another variable just for that, in the same way we did our force value. So we'll make it a private int force, and we'll set that equal to 50. So we're going to call this start force, so we know what it is. And then we can change these to start force. So that way, if we adjust it, we can adjust it everywhere in our code. All right. Now, if we save everything, we go back to our game, we can make sure this works. So when we hit play, our ball should start moving towards the paddles. And mine isn't, so let's make sure I read it right.
Did you put the script on the ball?
You know what, you're right, that's what it is. Okay, I was like, I think it's right. Okay, so let's put the script on our ball. So if we go to our Unity and we drag our ball script onto the ball, so it actually works. And we can make sure, yep, there's our ball script.
Just
then it should work.
Yeah, just FYI, guys, you can add scripts to your game objects the same way they did rigid body and circle collider and so on and so forth. If you did add component, ball script would be in the list as well.
Oh, that's pretty cool. All right, so once you get your script added on your ball and hit play, yeah, there we go. Now the ball moves and starts bouncing around.
Yay!
Yay, look, we got the start of a game. All right, now that our ball is moving, we need our paddles to start moving. So we're going to create a script for that. So the same way, we're going to go down to our assets and start a new C# script. And we're going to call this paddle script. And go ahead and open it up. And we're going to start off with some variables. Of course, serialized field. And we need a bool to know, this is how we're going to get our game to work, to know whether player 1 is pushing buttons or player 2 is pushing buttons. So we're going to make bool is player 2. That'll say, is this player 1? Is this player 2? Then we also need the speed of our paddles. And we're going to make that a float speed and set that to 0.2. And then we also need a transform for our position of our paddle. And then in start, we're going to set up our initialization of that. All right, then we also need to set up our buttons, like what you want the player to push to make their paddle to move. So today I learned a really cool way to do that. we're going to set 4 variables, and then we can use this Unity to assign the key that we want. And if we wanted to change it, it's really easy to do. So we're going to do serialized field, private key code. And we're going to name 4 of these: player 1 up, player 1 down, player 2 up, and player 2 down. I admit I copied and pasted this one 4 times, so I could just adjust it. So we have player 1 up, player 1 down, player 2 up, and player 2 down. All right, so now that we have our 4 buttons we're going to need, we're going to start moving our paddles. So in void update, we're going to write some if-else statements to make our paddles work. So if, and here's our Boolean, if it's player 2, if the input, and it's get key, and then the key we want to get for the input is player 2 up. So if they're pushing the button that we want them to push to go up, we want them to move up. And we're going to write a move up and a move down function. Else if the button they're pushing, which would be input get key, player 2 down.
You hit asterisk instead of the...
Oops, thank you. You're wondering why it didn't work. And then we're going to call move down. And then, of course, if it's not player 2, it's player 1.
You're missing your parentheses around input get key. Else if, and then you need to open parentheses.
Oh, that's where I missed it.
And now you need another one at the end.
At the end, yeah. So if our input is for our player 1 up, then we want to move up. And then else if the input get key, and the key we want to get is player 1 down. And if they push that, we want to move down. All right. So now we have to write our move up and move down, which is pretty easy. So we'll make a private void for move up, which needs nothing passed into it. And then we're going to move the transform position. So we'll use our my transform position, so the position of our paddle, and then we want a new position. And then we're just going to say we want the position of X to stay the same. And then we want the position of Y to change. We're going to add speed to it to make it go up. And then we pretty much do the exact same thing for move down, just we're going to take away the speed. So exact same line of code, we're just going to take away our speed instead of adding it. So that'll make it go down, and move up makes it go up. Everybody caught up?
If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute and just ask. No need to get in the queue or anything.
Yeah. All right, so let's give this a go, and we need to come drag our paddle script into both player 1 and player 2 so that both of them work. And then we're also going to have to go and look down here on our paddle script. We have a checkbox for our Boolean is player 2. Since right now I'm clicked on player 1, I would not check that box. We have the speed of our paddle. So if you think your paddles move too slow or too fast, you can adjust this number. And then we need to go through and assign what do we want player 1 to use to move and what do we want player 2 to use to move. So since player 1 is on the left-hand side, we can assign up to W and down to S. S, you have to click a couple times so it actually gets to the letter S. And then we can do our player 2 up and down using arrow up and arrow down. So we can assign those arrow up and arrow down. And then we also have to do the same thing to our player 2. So for player 2, since this is player 2, we do need to check the box so that way it can correctly work the buttons for 2. And then we need to assign the keys the same way as we did the other one for player up and player down. So we did W and S and up and down. Said ordinarily this would be probably handled through a input manager or maybe the game manager, but this seemed to be the easiest way to do it for now. All right, so we've got our script on both of our paddles. We should be able to click play and our ball should start bouncing and we should be able to move our paddles using our buttons. So let's see. Well, see, paddles move and the ball's bouncing. So we're getting there, moving along. All right, now we are going to change a couple things so that the game is a little bit more exciting and our ball works a little bit better. So we're going to adjust how the ball hits the paddle so that it'll give the ball a little bit more of an angle when you hit it. So let's reopen our paddle script and we're gonna add another variable in here. And this is gonna give the ball some direction. So we're going to keep this private and not serialize it because nobody is ever going to really need to change the direction of the ball probably. And we're gonna set it to 0 to start out. Just as a note, 0 is going to mean that the ball is still, 1 is going to mean the ball is moving up, and -1 is going to mean the ball is moving down. And then we also need to make a float that holds our previous position of our paddle, of the ball. No, the paddle, yeah. All right. Now we're going to add in another function down here. We have void start and we have void update. We're going to add one called void late update. And what it does is update at the very end of the frame. So at the very end of each frame that is deciding where the paddle and the ball is, it'll update this at the very, very end. And in here, we are going to keep track of our previous position. Previous position Y equals my transform position Y. Yeah, so this will store the paddle's position at the end of each frame. And then we're also going to add to start an update to the same previous position Y. All right, and then to adjust the position, we're gonna go back down to our private void late update, and we're going to add in our direction. So if the previous position Y is greater than my transform position Y, we want the direction to be -1. And then else if previous position y is less than our transform position, we want our direction to be 1. Else we want it to not have any direction. All right, and then we're going to add one more method or function that when the ball hits the paddle, it'll apply a force in the paddle's direction. So we're going to use void on collision exit. On collision exit 2D. So when the collider comes in contact with the ball, it'll do stuff when it's leaving that collision. So we are going to declare a variable in here, even though we shouldn't. Float adjust, just to add some direction. And then add in our collision with our rigid body. And give us some velocity. You don't appreciate how hard it is to type and talk at the same time.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're doing great, Jenny. Keep rocking.
Keep going. All right, let's keep writing this. Our collision with our rigid body so that our ball does something other than just bounce back and forth. Y plus R adjust. Okay. So now that we have that done, all right, now we're going to make sure, never mind, I wrote myself a note. We're gonna make sure the item is hitting the paddle and that it's the ball. It'll check its name and then it'll apply a force to it in the direction of the paddle's movement. So this should add speed to the ball and should hopefully make it faster as the game goes on. So let's make sure here that everything still works on our game and that our paddles hit the ball and kind of change its direction a little bit. So see, now we get some little bit of direction, can kind of decide where the ball's going. But we do have a problem. Our paddles will go up forever and down forever. And we don't really want that. We want them to stay in the playing field. So we're going to make sure we exit that. And we're going to go back to our paddle script. And we're going to create 2 new variables up here. That'll be our minimum Y and our maximum Y that we want our paddles to go. So we'll have a private int max Y, and that'll be 4 is where the top of our screen is. And we'll have a minimum Y, and that'll be -4, because that way everything's even. And then in our void update, we're going to add our checker to make sure that our paddle's position does not go past those 2 spots. So we'll add a vector 2 position and set it to our transform position. And then we're going to make sure that position Y, and we're going to use this thing called math clamp that clamps the range to stay within our 2 numbers that we picked. So our transform position Y, and we want to make sure it's between min Y and max Y. All right, so this should make sure that our paddles do not go outside of our minimum Y and our maximum Y. And then if we needed to adjust this because we thought, you know, we wanted the paddles to go lower or higher, we can just change these numbers. So let's make sure that works. It does not seem like it does. My number's probably off. Let's just keep going for now.
Jan,
What? Yes.
would we be able to put a slider on the top and bottom walls to keep those players from going past them?
You could put a collider on the top and bottom wall. You could.
The only
Oh,
yes,
you go ahead,
sorry.
Vass.
The only problem with that, Catherine, is that she's moving these paddles by moving the transform as opposed to moving them by force. So when she changes the position, it would put that paddle collider inside the wall collider, and you may have some, Skyrim level
Yeah.
physics glitches.
Okay, thank you.
And we're missing one line of code. So under here, under our clamp, we need to reassign where the paddle is based on where it's supposed to be clamped to. That should fix it. I know last night when I was making the paddles work correctly, I was kind of Googling to see what a lot of other people used. Because I can remember vaguely doing it from some of Unity's classes. And there are so many different ways you can restrict players to stay in one area. So under position Y math clamp, we want to assign our transform position to the position that we are keeping it to here. So with that fixed, we should be able to play and have our paddle stay. Yeah, there we go. So they don't go up forever anymore. They stay. All right. Now we're going to move on to the scoring system, because what fun is a game if you can't beat your friends and tell them that you had a higher point? So our scoring system needs two parts. One part's going to be the score, and one part's the number we see on the screen. The other part is we need to know if the ball is hitting what it needs to hit to create the score. So we're going to create another script, and we're going to call this our game manager. And this will handle our score system. So now we have our game manager. We're going to open this up. Oh no, we're not going to open this up. We need to create our canvas that's going to hold our score. So we're going to come here and right click, and we're going to go down to the UI, and we are going to pick right here, this text mesh pro. And when you pop it up, you'll probably get a window that says TMP importer, and you'll want to import the TMP essentials. At least I do that every time. It seems to make everything work. So we have a text box right here in our canvas, and the canvas looks really funny on the screen because it's like oriented towards your screen. It's not really a part of the game. Vass can probably explain it better than I can. But it always looks really weird in your game window up here. So we're going to rename this text so we know what our text is saying. And we're going to rename it to player one score. We also want to reset its position for now. And we're going to give it a new position because we want to put it up in the top corner. So I'm going to use its X as -90. Its Y as 130. And I have its Z as 1. Then we're going to, since this is player one and player one is on the left, we'll make sure it's down here left justified. And then we can also adjust the font size. I'm going to make it 20, actually make it 25. And then we can also set this as a number so we see what it looks like when we actually have a score in there. And there's all sorts of options in here. You can put your stuff anywhere you want. And then we also need to make one more of these for player two score. So we can again duplicate it, rename it to player two score. And then we want to put this on the other side of the screen. So we're going to make it, instead of being -190, we're going to make it 190. And then since it's on the right-hand side, we're going to make our alignment be right justified. So they're nice and even with each other. All right. Now we have our game manager script that we made, and we're going to go drag our game manager into our hierarchy so we can use it. Oh no, wait, we have to make an empty game object. So create, right click and create empty game object. And we can rename this to our game manager. And then we can put our game manager in that. And that's going to handle a lot of things.
Reset.
Oh, reset it, you're right. Good. All right. I always forget to reset things. Okay, let's open up our game manager script. And this is where we're going to handle all of our score for the game. So we need to declare some variables for our score. So our favorite serialized field, and we need to use TMP text. And we're going to call this player 1 score UI. And then we need to make one for player 2. And then we need, those are the text that'll show up on the canvas. And then we need 2 ints of our own so that we can actually change the score. So we'll make a private int player score, player 1 score, and we're going to set it to 0. And one for player 2 score, which will be 0. So those will hold our score, and then we're also going to work with the text to update the score. So now we're going to need a function to add 1 to the score whenever the ball hits the wall. So the ball script's going to handle the collision with the wall, and the game manager is going to update the score. So we need to make here a private void to add to player score. And we're going to pass in what player number it is. So if it's player number 1, so if our player number equals 1, then the player 1 score is going to add 1. And then we're going to update the text on our UI. So we'll do player 1 score UI dot text, and that's going to update it so it says the right number. Oops. All right, now we need to do this for player 2. So if it's player number is equal to 2, then we need to update player 2 score. And update the UI also so it says the same thing. All right, so now that we have all that, we're going to have to go and adjust our player scores into our UI. So we're going to go back to Unity, and we're going to look in our game manager, our game manager over here. And now we have a spot that says player 1 score UI, and it's looking for a text spot, and player 2 score UI, and it's looking for the thing. So we're going to go up to our canvas where we made player 1 score and player 2 score, and we're going to drag and put them into their rightful spots over here. So now we're going to go over to our ball script and add some extra things. So normally we do this with event delegates, but this is like a simpler way to do it. So we're going to stick with simple. So let's open up our ball script, because what we need to do is we need our ball script to know that the ball has collided with the wall, and then we need it to add 1 to the score and then reset the ball again. So before we do this, we're going to go back to our game. We need a starting position, because we're going to reset our ball to the starting position. We need a starting position for it to go to. So we're going to create an empty game object, reset it to 0 so it starts in the middle, and we're going to rename this as start point. Okay, now we can go back to our ball script, and we're going to add some things. We need a couple new variables. We need our start point, which will be transform start point. We need to refer to our walls. So we're going to go back to where our walls are in Unity, and we need to create a tag so that we could say, this is wall for player 1, and this is the wall for player 2. So if you go and click on your wall, underneath walls, we have our player 1 wall and our player 2 wall. We're going to create a tag, and a tag is a string that will let the game be able to know that this is a player 1. So we're going to go here to tag, and there's no tag that says player 1 wall. So we're going to go ahead and add a tag, and it has an empty list. We're going to click on this little plus, and we're going to create our own, and we're going to call it player 1 wall. And then while we're here, to make it easier, we're going to click on the plus one, and we're going to make ourselves a player 2 wall. All right, now we're going to go over here, click on our wall, and now when we go to change the tag, we can tag it as player 1 wall or player 2 wall. So we'll tag player 1 wall as player 1 and player 2 wall as player 2. Now we're going to go into our ball script, and we're going to refer to those tags that we just made. So we're going to use a constant string player 1 wall, and that's going to equal our tag we just made. And then we're going to do it again for player 2's wall. Try to make sure we keep our thing the same. All right, so now we have those. Then we're also need to make our game manager. We need to be able to refer to the game manager in our other script so we can update. So we'll have a game manager GM, so that refers to our game manager. So at the start, we have our
private.
You're right. There we go. All right, so at the start, every time start's called, we'll want to restart our game or reset our ball. So we're going to add reset ball here as well. So when our game starts, our ball's in the middle. We also need to initialize our game manager just like we did to our rigid body. So find object of type, and our type will be game manager. All right, now we need to create our reset ball method. So it actually does our ball resetting. We want it to reset our ball in the middle, but we're also gonna want it to apply that force to get it started so you can start playing again. So we're going to move one part down here. So first we want to set our position to our start point. And then we want to set the velocity of our ball to 0, so it's not moving. Or else it would just carry over whatever speed it had before. And then we're going to move this, because since we are going to need our force to start the ball moving, we don't really need it there. We're going to move it down here, since we're calling it in reset. All right. So this will reset the ball, get it to the start position, set the ball's velocity to 0, and then add force to get the ball to start moving again for the next round. So now that's done, we need to write a method so we can know when the ball hits the wall. So before in our other script on paddle, we used on collision exit. This time we're going to use on collision enter because we want to know when the ball hits that wall so we can update the score. So we're going to make a private void for on collision enter 2D. That was the wrong one. And then we need to say if it collides, if our game object that has the tag player 1 wall, then we want to call our game manager, and we want to call our function. And since it hits player 1's wall, we want to update player 2's score. So we're going to tell it to. And then we are going to reset the ball.
I think you made add to player score private, so that's why it's got the squiggly on it.
So I need to make it public?
Yeah.
Okay. And we all need to go to our game manager and change that. I just leave it as void, right?
Yeah, the return type's fine. It's just as private, you don't have access to it from the other script. So with public, you do. So yeah, just type in public. Just type in, there you go. Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. Okay, there we go. Now we don't have an arrow anymore. I was like, what did I mess up? Okay. Now we need to do another one for if it collides with player 2's wall. So if there's a collision with the game object tagged as player 2 walls, then we want to have our game manager add to player score, and we're going to pass in 1 because it's player 2's wall gives a point to player 1, and then we want to reset the ball so we can start a game over. All right, so now that we have that, we are going to go over here to our Unity, and we need to drag the start point into the start point box on the script. So let's go to our game manager, and it doesn't have it. Maybe I made it private.
What are you trying to do? The on collision enter?
No, the start point.
Oh, you need
Shouldn't the
to
start point go with
just
this?
serialize field it.
Oh,
The transform? Yeah.
which one?
The transform, there's talking about the start point?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
have
so
serialized field transform start
go
point
to
because I
the,
need to refer to that.
yeah, so click on the ball, go back to the thing, click on the ball, and then go down to the script and you'll have a little,
Oh, there it is, start
Yeah.
point. Okay, so when you click on the ball and you go to the script, that's where it is, start point. You're gonna need to drag your start point that you set on the hierarchy down to that spot. So that way it knows to restart there every time. All right, let's save our game and we should be able to play it and have our score update. I'll see, every time it'll just keep adding and it resets to the same spot.
nice.
Nice.
Now you need to let player 2 get some points.
No, I don't like them. well, yeah. All right, there we go.
Yay, look at that.
So that's it for today. We've got our working script, and next Saturday we're going to add some music. We're going to change our colors around, and maybe add a button or something.
And can we also change the sprite that's on the ball to Johan's face?
We could, you know.
Well,
That'd
thank
be
you everyone for
fun.
coming. I appreciate everyone showing up.
I'm going to work on that.
Oh my God.
Well, that's it. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Good job. Well done.
Good job, Jenny.
Awesome, thank you.
Anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns? Everybody have a good time?
We're good. That was awesome.
Yay.
Cool. So,
Thank you.
so this presentation, right now we have to get it from Zoom, and then we'll upload it up to our YouTube, and we'll provide the link in general. Cool.
We have a GitHub too. We'll share with you with the project.
Nice. Okay, so we can post it all together. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Maybe you can send me that link so I can post it on the YouTube page as well.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Sounds good. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for showing up. Make sure to RSVP for the talk next Saturday, and I believe we'll just start from where we left off here, right?
Yes.
Yes, we will.
Sweet.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you very much.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
See you all.
Everyone.